Millionaire marries poor girl to escape a scam. Nathan Carter was the perfect picture of the American dream. Young, charming, and the owner of an enviable fortune, he was the heir to one of New York's largest real estate empires. At just 28 years old, he carried the weight of a legacy his family had built over generations. Yet he seemed to have everything anyone could ever want: wealth, power, and a fiancée who, to many, was the ideal match. Olivia Harper was not only stunning but also a constant presence in the most exclusive circles of high society. She knew how to carry herself, dazzled at gala events, and appeared to complement Nathan perfectly. But not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Though Nathan believed his relationship with Olivia was built on genuine love, there was always something that felt off, something he couldn't quite name. Olivia was attentive and affectionate, but there were moments when her words felt hollow, as if rehearsed. He tried to dismiss these thoughts, attributing them to the pressures of his demanding routine. After all, Olivia was everything a man in his position could dream of. Before continuing, make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. One day, while preparing for an important business meeting, Nathan realized he had forgotten a critical document in the master bedroom of his mansion. Rushing up the stairs, he heard a muffled sound coming from the room. It was Olivia. Her voice, usually soft and composed, carried an emotion he rarely heard from her. Nathan stopped by the slightly open door, hesitant, and then he heard something that made his blood run cold. "I know it's taking longer than expected, but be patient," Olivia said on the phone. "Once the wedding happens, things will be different. You know this isn't about love, it's an arrangement. They want to protect their legacy, and I want to maintain my lifestyle. That's all that matters." Nathan felt the ground vanish beneath his feet. Each word stabbed his heart like a sharp blade. He stood frozen, trying to process the reality. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't paranoia. Olivia wasn't just deceiving him. She was part of a carefully orchestrated plan to exploit his fortune. The woman he thought he loved, the person he planned to spend his life with, was nothing but an illusion. Unable to bear another second of the scene, Nathan quietly left, his heart heavy and his hands trembling. He knew he needed proof before taking any action, but above all, he needed to summon the strength to face the truth and make a decision. The image of Olivia, so perfect, so composed, was now shattered into 1,000 pieces before his eyes. He no longer knew what to believe. That same night, the Carter mansion felt larger and more silent than ever. Nathan could barely focus. Olivia's voice, dripping with disdain and falseness, echoed in his mind like a broken record. He tried to stay calm, but his thoughts were a whirlwind. Determined to uncover more answers, he resolved to observe carefully before making his move. Hours later, deep into the night, Nathan heard footsteps in the hallway. Through the slightly open door of his office, he saw Olivia walking toward the library, her cell phone pressed close to her face. He knew this wasn't just a casual call. Feeling his heart race, Nathan followed at a distance, as silent as a shadow. On the other side of the imposing mahogany library door, her voice resurfaced. It was low, but he could hear every word clearly. "I love you, but you need to trust me. Once all of this is done, things will be different. He'll never find out he's not as clever as he thinks. Nathan is just a pawn in this game. It won't be long, and it'll just be the two of us. You'll see." Nathan felt as though the wind had been knocked out of him. The confirmation was even more devastating than he had imagined. She wasn't just using him, she loved another man. A stranger had infiltrated his life, unseen, and was tearing apart everything he believed to be true. Instead of confronting her on the spot, Nathan pulled back. He knew acting impulsively wouldn't give him the answers he needed. He returned to his office and sank into the leather armchair, staring into the void as he tried to collect his thoughts. His mind cycled through anger, sadness, and disbelief. He knew he needed to act intelligently, but the pain was suffocating. The next day, the stage was set. A family luncheon with the Carters to finalize the wedding details. It was the kind of event Olivia adored, surrounded by luxury and formality. Nathan knew it would be the perfect moment to expose the truth, but at the same time, he felt the weight of facing his own parents. They held Olivia in high regard and, in a way, had encouraged the relationship from the very beginning. When everyone was gathered in the impeccably decorated dining room, Nathan barely touched his food. Olivia, with her flawless smile, chatted about flowers and music while Nathan's parents nodded enthusiastically. The contrast between the normalcy of the scene and what he knew about Olivia made his blood boil. He couldn't wait any longer. Suddenly, Nathan placed his fork on the table with a sharp clink that drew everyone's attention. Silence filled the room. Olivia looked at him with mild surprise, her expression still laced with false sweetness. "I need to say something," Nathan began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "This wedding is not going to happen." The impact of his words was immediate. Olivia's eyes widened in shock, while his parents exchanged confused glances. "You must be joking," Olivia said, attempting to maintain her composure. Nathan stared directly at her, his voice now firmer. "Do you think I'm joking? Last night I heard you on the phone. I know about the arrangement, Olivia. I know you never loved me and that this has all been a charade to keep your comfortable lifestyle. You used me." Her expression changed in an instant. The smile vanished, and the mask she had worn so perfectly began to crack. "Nathan, you're overreacting. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me," he shot back, his voice now raised. "I heard everything. You love someone else. You and my parents orchestrated this whole charade to ensure I followed the path they wanted while you took advantage of it. It ends here and now." Nathan's parents were visibly shaken, trying to intervene, but he raised his hand, signaling them to stay silent. "I'm done being manipulated. If you think you can control my life, you're dead wrong. And you, Olivia, don't ever come near me again." Without waiting for a response, Nathan stood and left the room, leaving behind shocked faces and a heavy silence that seemed to fill every corner of the house. From that moment on, he knew nothing would ever be the same again. Nathan walked out of the mansion with steady steps, but inside, he felt like a storm was raging. The weight of everything that had just happened pressed down on his chest, making it hard to even breathe. As he opened the garage door, his eyes landed on his collection of luxury cars. Yet none of them brought him any satisfaction. He chose the first one he saw, a sleek black sports car glimmering under the lights, and sped off down the long private driveway leading to the city. The world around him felt like a haze. The city, with its heavy traffic and hurried crowds, blurred past him. He drove aimlessly, without a destination or a plan, trying to escape the pain growing in his chest. Why Olivia? Why his own parents? The questions swirled in his mind, but no answers came. He felt betrayed, used, and, above all, utterly alone. After driving for hours, Nathan realized he was far beyond the city limits. The road had grown narrower and more deserted. That's when he saw a familiar sign. He was near his family's beach house in Montauk. The place, typically reserved for peaceful summers and glamorous events, now seemed like a distant refuge from all the chaos consuming his life. Without a second thought, he turned onto the road leading to the house. When he arrived, Nathan pulled into the gravel driveway and sat in the car for a long moment, staring at the grand white house standing stark against the gray sky. The sound of waves crashing in the distance created a steady, soothing rhythm. It was almost ironic that this place, which had always symbolized luxury and happiness, was now his only chance at finding peace. He got out of the car, carrying only his keys and phone, and entered the house that felt as empty as he did. The silence was absolute. The main room, with its massive glass windows overlooking the ocean, seemed untouched. Nathan ran his hand across the light wooden furniture, feeling its cold texture beneath his fingers. He climbed the stairs to the master bedroom, collapsed onto the bed, and stared at the ceiling. Finally, the emotions began to overflow. He felt tears welling in his eyes but held them back. He didn't want to appear weak, not even to himself. He picked up his phone and wrote a brief message to his parents. He explained that he needed time, that he'd be away for a while, and that he didn't want to be disturbed. After sending it, he turned the phone off and set it aside. That disconnection was necessary. He needed to distance himself from everything and everyone, even if it left him completely isolated. The next morning, Nathan woke up early. The sound of the waves beckoned him outside, and he walked barefoot along the beach, feeling the cold sand under his feet. The vastness of the ocean seemed to mirror his mind, an immense space filled with turbulence and uncertainty. He walked until he was tired, until the sun began to rise on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Despite everything, that view sparked a small flicker of comfort. Later, he decided to head to the nearby town to stock up on supplies. Walking through the streets of Montauk felt strange, a place so simple and peaceful, so different from New York. He entered a small local market, picked up a few items, and, while paying at the counter, something outside the window caught his attention. It was a modest coffee shop with a sign that read Seaside Haven. The name intrigued him, and something inside him urged him to go there. As soon as he stepped into the cafe, the smell of freshly brewed coffee and warm, baked bread surrounded him. The place was cozy, with rustic furniture and soft lighting that created an intimate atmosphere. Nathan chose a table near the window and ordered a black coffee, simply to have something to occupy his hands. He didn't know what he was looking for there, but for the first time in days, he felt a sliver of comfort. Perhaps this little cafe could be his starting point to figure out what to do with his life. Nathan sat at the table by the window, watching the quiet street of Montauk, where the activity was modest yet full of a simplicity he hadn't experienced in years. The warm coffee in his hands was almost therapeutic. He felt the heat seep through the porcelain, warming his fingers and, in a way, grounding him, if only briefly. Everything here seemed so far removed from the chaos and superficiality of New York. It was as if he were in a parallel universe, where things were simpler, more authentic. He stayed there for hours, lost in thought. He watched as people came and went, greeting each other with genuine smiles. It was a stark contrast to the calculated coldness of the social interactions he was used to. Nathan, who had always been surrounded by crowds at events and meetings, now felt the crushing weight of loneliness. The sound of genuine laughter, coming from a group at a nearby table, pulled him back to reality. He looked around, trying to understand what it was about this place that fascinated him so deeply. After some time, he decided to leave and drive aimlessly again. However, as he approached his car, something made him stop. He looked back at the cafe once more. There was something about that place, something that pulled him back, like a magnet. Without fully understanding why, he returned the next day, and the day after that, and the one after that. On his third visit, something shifted. As Nathan stood in line to order, he heard a warm, gentle voice from behind the counter. "Black coffee, as always?" He looked up and saw a young woman with chestnut brown hair tied up in a way that was casual yet elegant. Her eyes were a deep, piercing blue, the kind that seemed to see beyond the surface. She had an earnest smile, the kind you rarely see, and her presence radiated a comforting energy that stood in stark contrast to the heaviness Nathan carried. "Yes, please," he replied, surprised that she'd remembered his usual order. She laughed softly. "You're becoming a regular. I don't think I've seen you around here before. Just spending a few days in town." Nathan hesitated, not wanting to reveal too much. Something like that. Just needed a break from everything. She smiled again, but this time with a touch of understanding. "Well, whatever it is you're escaping, This place has a way of helping people find a little peace. Over the following days, Nathan learned her name was Ellie Bennett. She was the owner of the cafe, something he wouldn't have guessed at first glance. Ellie had a way of speaking that put people at ease, as if they were talking to a lifelong friend. Gradually, Nathan began to open up, sharing small fragments of his life without ever mentioning his full name or his wealth. He craved something genuine, something untarnished by the image his status projected. Ellie, on the other hand, seemed completely unaware that she was talking to someone so far removed from the simplicity of life in Montauk. She shared stories about her childhood in the town, how she had opened the cafe to support herself and her younger brother after losing their parents. There was a quiet strength in Ellie that intrigued Nathan. She didn't complain about the hardships she'd faced or dwell on what she had lost. On the contrary, she spoke with pride about what she had built, even if it was simple. With each passing day, Nathan felt a bit more of the weight on his chest lift. The cafe had become more than just a refuge. It was now a place where he could reconnect with something he felt he had lost within himself. And Ellie, unknowingly, began to occupy an increasingly larger space in his thoughts. After a few days, Nathan's life began to take on a new rhythm. The beach house, once a symbol of empty luxury in his life, now felt like a sanctuary where he could finally breathe freely. Mornings were filled with long walks along the shore, the sound of the waves providing a constant soundtrack that soothed him. Afternoons were almost always spent at Seaside Haven. Nathan not only felt at ease in the cafe, but he also began to feel something he hadn't experienced in a long time: belonging. That morning, waking to the cloudy skies typical of the region, he glanced at his phone, still turned off since the message he'd sent to his parents. Nathan wasn't ready to face the echoes of his old life. He knew the mansion in New York and the circles of people around it were likely buzzing with questions, maybe even gossip. But none of that mattered now. He got dressed and drove to the cafe, feeling a faint anticipation building in his chest, an anticipation that grew stronger every time he saw Ellie. When he arrived, Nathan noticed the cafe was busier than usual. It seemed like something special was going on. Inside, Ellie's lively voice stood out as she darted from one table to another, serving customers and organizing orders. Even in the middle of the rush, she managed to smile at everyone. Nathan waited in line, watching her every move with an attentiveness he didn't quite understand himself. When it was finally his turn, Ellie looked at him with that warm smile that seemed to brighten the room, even on the grayest of days. "It's busier than usual today," Nathan remarked as he handed over the money for his coffee. "Oh yes, it's the cafe's anniversary, 2 years since I opened the doors. It's a special day for me," she replied, a mix of pride and emotion evident in her voice. Nathan was surprised by the revelation. He'd never imagined that something as simple as a cafe could hold so much meaning for someone. "Congratulations. It looks like everyone in town loves this place." Ellie let out a soft laugh. "Well, I love this place too. When I first opened it, it was more out of necessity than a dream. My brother was still a teenager, and I needed something that would let me stay close to home. Working anywhere else wasn't an option for me. But over time, I realized this became so much more than I expected. It's not just a cafe. It's a place where people can feel at home, and that makes me happy." Nathan listened to every word, feeling a growing admiration for her. Ellie lacked the superficial shine he was so accustomed to. Her strength and dedication were genuine, built on challenges she faced with courage. Throughout the day, he stayed at the cafe, observing how Ellie interacted with each customer. She knew everyone's name, their stories, and made a point of treating each person like a friend. When the rush finally subsided, Ellie sat down behind the counter for a moment, clearly exhausted, but with a satisfied expression on her face. Nathan approached her. 2 years of hard work, from the looks of it. But it was worth it. You've created something amazing. She smiled at him, a little surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you," Sometimes I wonder how I even got this far. But then I remember why I started all this. And that keeps me going." He felt a connection in that moment, something he couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was Ellie's honesty, so different from anything he had ever known. Maybe it was the way she faced life with determination, never complaining or asking for more than she needed. Whatever it was, Nathan found himself being drawn closer to her with each passing day. At the end of that day, as he left the cafe, Nathan realized he wasn't just running away from his old life. Somehow, he was discovering something new, something that could fill the emptiness he had felt for so long. And Ellie, with her simplicity and strength, was at the center of this unexpected revelation. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through the curtains of the beach house, Nathan decided it was time to let his parents know he wouldn't be returning to New York anytime soon. He already knew what to expect. Messages filled with worry and an inevitable attempt to make him reconsider. Even so, he felt it was necessary to temporarily cut the cord that kept him tied to that stifling life. Sitting on the porch with his phone finally powered on, he carefully typed the message. He kept it brief, simply saying he was fine but needed more time. He asked them not to reach out, assuring them he would make contact when he was ready. After hitting send, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. For the first time, he felt in control of his choices, free to decide what he wanted to do with his days. Now that his time in Montauk seemed indefinite, Nathan began to build a routine that became surprisingly comforting. His mornings were still spent on the beach, walking for hours as he tried to process recent events and clear his mind. In the afternoons, Ellie's cafe became his regular destination. With each visit, he grew more at ease in the welcoming space. Ellie, for her part, seemed to notice his frequent presence but never pressured him with questions. She simply greeted him with the same warm smile, exchanging light conversations that gradually began to deepen. She was a constant presence but never invasive, something Nathan found incredibly rare. One day, as Ellie wiped down the counter, Nathan, without much forethought, asked, "How do you manage all of this on your own? Running the cafe, dealing with so many people, keeping everything going? It seems overwhelming." Ellie paused and looked at him. There was softness in her eyes, but also something deeper, a kind of exhaustion she hid well. "It is overwhelming. It always has been. But I didn't have a choice. When our parents died, my brother Jake was still very young. There wasn't time to grieve or complain. I had to work, take care of him, and make sure he had a future. Opening the cafe was a solution that gave me control over my life. It was that or watch everything fall apart." Nathan was silent for a moment, absorbing her words. There was a strength in Ellie that he deeply admired. She faced challenges he could barely imagine, yet she did so with a dignity that left him speechless. "And Jake? Does he still live here with you?" Ellie smiled at the mention of her brother. "Not anymore. He's in college now, studying computer science. He's dedicated, hardworking, but he never forgets where he came from. He comes home whenever he can and helps out at the cafe. Knowing he's achieving something big is what keeps me going. Every sacrifice was worth it." Nathan felt a tightness in his chest. Ellie had faced losses and challenges far greater than anything he had ever experienced, yet she didn't let them define her. Instead, she transformed her pain into something meaningful, something that not only sustained her own life, but also enriched the lives of those around her. In that moment, he realized that Montauk wasn't just a place where he was hiding. It was where he was starting to rediscover himself, inspired by someone who lived a life so different from his own, yet seemed to offer him something he had never known he needed: authenticity. Ellie, without even knowing it, was becoming a beacon of light in the darkness that had consumed him. Nathan began going to Seaside Haven every day, almost as if the cafe had become a natural extension of his routine. There was something about the simplicity of the place and Ellie's presence that made the weight on his chest feel lighter, if only for a few hours. He always chose the same table by the window, where he could watch the street outside while also catching glimpses of Ellie as she worked. There was an ease in her movements, even in the most mundane tasks, that fascinated him. It was as though every gesture she made carried purpose. One overcast afternoon, with only a few customers in the cafe, Ellie took advantage of a quiet moment to sit at Nathan's table. She brought over 2 cups of freshly brewed coffee and settled across from him, her expression curious yet warm. "I've noticed you've been coming here every day. It seems like the cafe has become your refuge," she said with a friendly smile. Nathan hesitated before answering. He knew Ellie was straightforward, but never in a way that felt intrusive. "It's a good place to think. I guess that's what I needed right now. A space to breathe." Ellie rested her chin on her hand and looked at him intently. "Sometimes stepping away from routine is exactly what we need to find clarity. But I have a feeling you're not just stepping away from routine. You're running from something bigger, aren't you?" The question hit Nathan like a cold breeze. He looked away for a moment, taking a sip of coffee to buy himself time before responding. "Maybe I am. My life was full of things that seemed important, but suddenly, all of it felt meaningless. I needed to step back to figure out what actually matters." Ellie nodded slowly, as though she understood exactly what he meant. "I know what it's like to feel like everything around you is empty, like it's not real. That's how I felt when I lost my parents. Suddenly, everything I thought I knew about life was turned upside down. But instead of letting myself get lost in that emptiness, I realized I needed to build something new, something true to me. I think the cafe was my way of filling that space." Nathan remained silent, letting her words sink in. He had never met someone who spoke with such honesty and depth. Ellie didn't try to impress him or steer the conversation to pry details about his life, as so many people from his old world often did. She was just herself. That authenticity was both disarming and comforting. In the days that followed, the bond between Nathan and Ellie began to deepen. Ellie, always open and thoughtful, would ask questions that forced Nathan to reflect on things he usually avoided. "What would you do if you could start over?" she asked one day. Nathan, caught off guard, couldn't answer right away. He realized he had never allowed himself to think about starting over because his life had always been shaped by the expectations and obligations imposed on him by others. At the same time, Nathan began to notice details about Ellie that had previously escaped him. He saw the care with which she treated each customer, the patience she showed when dealing with small problems, and the way her face lit up whenever someone thanked her for her service. More than just a cafe owner, Ellie seemed to be an anchor for many people in the town. One afternoon, as Ellie was closing the register and Nathan was about to leave, she called him back. "I can see you're searching for answers, Nathan. Maybe you don't even know what they are yet, but Montauk has a way of revealing things when the time is right. Until then, I hope this place can be a rest stop for you." He smiled, a genuine smile that hadn't graced his face in a long time. "This place already means more to me than you can imagine, Ellie. Thank you for that." As he walked out of the cafe, Nathan realized Ellie was right. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but something inside him told him he was on the right path. And that path seemed to lead back to Seaside Haven, where, somehow, he found the peace he never knew he needed. The days in Montauk stretched on slowly but were surprisingly pleasant for Nathan. The cafe remained his daily refuge, and Ellie, more and more, seemed to be the presence that added color to his gray world. One sunny afternoon, as the cafe quieted down, Nathan was engrossed in a book he had found on the small shelf in the corner. Ellie approached, drying her hands on a linen towel, and smiled when she saw the title. "That's one of my favorites. I used to read it to my brother when he was younger. I think it was one of the few things that got him interested in literature," she said, pulling out a chair to sit next to Nathan. He looked up and noticed something different about her that day. There was a lightness, an energy about her that seemed even more vibrant than usual. "Do you read often?" he asked, curious to keep the conversation going. "I used to," These days, with the cafe and all my responsibilities, I don't have as much time. But every now and then, I treat myself to an afternoon of reading. It's one of the few things I still do just for me. Nathan was intrigued by her response. Ellie was the kind of person who poured all her energy into others, and the more he got to know her, the more he admired that about her. But at the same time, he couldn't help but wonder if anyone took care of her the way she seemed to care for the world around her. In the middle of their conversation, a customer entered the cafe, bringing a light-hearted energy with him. It was a young man Nathan quickly realized was Jake, Ellie's brother. He had the same charismatic energy as Ellie, but in a more laid-back and playful way. Jake walked straight up to Ellie and wrapped her in a warm hug. "Hey sis, just stopping by to say hi before I head back to campus." Ellie smiled, clearly delighted to see him, and introduced Nathan to Jake. The young man looked at Nathan with a mix of curiosity and playful mischief in his eyes. "So, you're the guy who's been coming here every day, huh? I hope you're treating my sister well. She works harder than she should. So if you're causing her any trouble, I'll have to deal with it." Ellie laughed and gave her brother a light slap on the arm, visibly embarrassed. Nathan just smiled, feeling oddly comfortable with their dynamic. Jake didn't stay long, but his visit brought a different kind of warmth to the cafe. It was easy to see how close the siblings were and how much Ellie cherished their bond. After Jake left, Ellie sat down next to Nathan again. "He's always been like that. Ever since we were kids, he's had this playful streak. It's nice to see that, despite everything we've been through, he's managed to keep it. I'd do anything for him, you know? He's my greatest accomplishment." Nathan looked at her, moved by the depth of her words. He had never met anyone who spoke about another person with such pride and love. It was a kind of connection he had never experienced with his own family, where everything felt transactional, burdened by expectations and obligations. "You're truly amazing, Ellie," he said suddenly, almost without realizing it. "Not just for everything you've done for your brother, but for the way you touch the lives of everyone around you. It's not every day someone meets someone like you." She blushed slightly, lowering her gaze. "I just do what I can. I think, in the end, all that really matters is being there for the people who truly count." Nathan fell silent for a moment, letting her words sink in. He felt a lump form in his throat as he realized how much they contrasted with everything he had known up until now. Ellie did things without expecting anything in return. She was driven by genuine love for others, something he was beginning to admire more than anything. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Nathan looked at Ellie and felt something he had never felt before. She was unlike anyone he had ever known, and he knew in that moment that his life would never be the same. As the weeks passed, Nathan and Ellie formed a connection that was impossible to ignore. The cafe was no longer just a refuge for Nathan. It was the place where he found Ellie, where simple conversations turned into profound moments. By now, he knew every detail of Seaside Haven, the small imperfections in the wooden tables, the comforting hum of the coffee machine, and the constant aroma of freshly baked bread. But what captivated him most was Ellie. Each day, he discovered something new about her, each fragment of her story making him admire her even more. On a rainy afternoon, the cafe was nearly empty. Nathan sat at his usual table, watching Ellie organize the shelves behind the counter. She seemed distracted, perhaps lost in thought. When she finally noticed Nathan's gaze, she smiled and walked over with 2 steaming cups of tea. "No coffee today," she said, placing a cup in front of him. "Days like this call for something lighter." Nathan chuckled softly and thanked her, but he noticed a shadow in her expression. "Are you okay? You seem worried." Ellie hesitated for a moment before sitting down across from him. "It's nothing serious. It's just, sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. Jake's in college now, building his future, and that makes me so happy. But I can't help thinking, what about me? Is this enough? The cafe? This life? Will I ever want more?" The vulnerability in her words caught Nathan off guard. Ellie, who always seemed so strong and confident, was now revealing her humanity, her doubts and fears like anyone else. He knew what it was like to feel trapped in a life that seemed small compared to what it could be. "Ellie, what you've built here is incredible," Nathan began, his voice low but full of sincerity. "You've created a home, not just for you and Jake, but for everyone who walks through that door. That's more than most people ever accomplish. But if you want more, there's nothing wrong with that. You deserve everything the world has to offer." Ellie gave him a shy smile, but her eyes held a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "I just don't know how. I guess I've gotten so used to worrying about others that I've never stopped to think about what I really want for myself." Nathan saw himself reflected in her words. He, too, had spent much of his life being guided by the expectations of others, never asking himself what he truly desired. That conversation, more than any other, made him realize how similar they were in some ways. Both of them were searching for something more, though neither knew exactly what that was yet. That day, Nathan decided he wanted to do something for Ellie, something to show her that she, too, deserved to dream and pursue more. The next morning, he visited the local bookstore and picked out a leather-bound journal, something simple but beautiful. Returning to the cafe, he handed her the gift with a small note tucked into the first page. "For your dreams, no matter how big or small they are, they deserve to be written and lived." Ellie was speechless, holding the journal delicately, as if it were something precious. "Nathan, I don't know what to say. Thank you." He smiled, trying not to show how much that moment meant to him. "You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll use it." From that day on, something shifted between them. Ellie began sharing more of her thoughts, her fears, and even her dreams. Nathan, in turn, felt like he was finally discovering what it meant to truly connect with someone. No masks, no hidden agendas. Every conversation, every glance exchanged, brought them closer together, as if they were building something neither of them had realized they needed. And so, between cups of coffee and rainy afternoons, Nathan and Ellie's story continued to intertwine, deeper, more genuine with each passing day. After weeks of growing closer to Ellie and learning to see life from a new perspective, Nathan felt it was time to take the next step. He wanted to break free from the routine of cafe conversations, to create a special moment for her, something that would show her just how much he admired her and how profoundly she had changed his view of the world. So he decided to invite her to dinner. That afternoon, as Ellie wiped down the counter after the lunch rush, Nathan mustered his courage and approached her. There was an unusual nervousness about him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He wasn't a man easily intimidated, but with Ellie, things were different. She was different. "Ellie," he began, as she looked up at him with her usual warm smile. "What do you think about having dinner with me tonight? I'd like to thank you for everything, for giving me this space and, in a way, for helping me find some peace." Ellie blinked, surprised by the invitation. She was silent for a few seconds before a warm smile spread across her face. "Of course, Nathan. I'd love to." With that, Nathan spent the rest of the afternoon planning the details. He wanted it to be special, but not over the top, something that matched Ellie's simplicity and authenticity. He chose a small, cozy local restaurant with a stunning view of the ocean, perfectly reflecting the tranquility of Montauk. When Ellie arrived at the restaurant that evening, Nathan was left speechless. She wore a simple dress, yet it looked as though it had been tailored just for her. Her hair was loose, and there was a natural beauty about her that completely captivated him. For a moment, he wondered how someone like her could be so unique, so unlike anyone else he had ever known. The dinner began with lighthearted conversations but quickly delved into deeper, more personal topics. Nathan, who had always avoided talking about his life before Montauk, finally felt ready to share more. He told her about his childhood, the constant pressure of growing up in a family that demanded perfection, the broken engagement, and the crushing betrayal that had driven him to Montauk. Ellie listened intently, without judgment, offering him something he hadn't realized he desperately needed: empathy. "I'm so sorry for everything you went through, Nathan," she said, absent-mindedly playing with the simple ring on her finger. "But, in a way, I'm glad you came here. Sometimes, bad things lead us to the right places." Nathan looked at her, and for a moment, the world seemed to go silent. Only the distant sound of waves filled the space. "Ellie, do you have any idea how much you've changed my life? Before I met you, I didn't know who I really was. You showed me there's more to life than wealth, status, or expectations. You gave me something I never had before: purpose." Ellie blushed, glancing away for a moment, but the smile on her lips was genuine. "I didn't do anything special, Nathan. I just tried to be myself." After dinner, Ellie surprised Nathan. Instead of ending the night there, she invited him to visit a place that was special to her. Without hesitation, he agreed. Ellie took him to a dance hall in the center of town, a place that, at first glance, seemed frozen in time. Soft lights hung from the ceiling, couples swayed to the sound of a live band, and there was an air of nostalgia that instantly captivated Nathan. "I used to come here with my parents when I was a kid," Ellie explained, pulling him toward the dance floor. "It was my mom's favorite place. She used to say music has the power to heal." Nathan wasn't an experienced dancer, but as he held Ellie's hands and followed her steps, he realized he didn't need to be. Her presence made everything feel natural, as if the rest of the world had disappeared and only the two of them remained. They danced late into the night, laughing and exchanging glances that said more than words ever could. When they finally left the dance hall, walking through Montauk's quiet streets under the soft glow of streetlights, Nathan felt that something had shifted between them. Ellie made him want to be a better person, someone worthy of being by her side. And, for the first time in a long while, he felt that maybe he was on the right path. The night felt wrapped in magic as Nathan and Ellie left the dance hall. The sound of the music still echoed in their minds as they strolled through Montauk's peaceful streets. The town seemed to be asleep, and the only sound accompanying them was the gentle crash of waves in the distance. Ellie, vibrant and with a newfound sparkle in her eyes, spoke about how much that place had meant to her, each detail steeped in memories of times spent with her parents. Nathan listened intently, completely captivated by the passion in her voice. As they walked, Ellie abruptly stopped and turned to him. "Now it's your turn to share," she said, crossing her arms and tilting her head playfully. "I showed you something that means a lot to me. What about you? Is there a place or something special that holds meaning for you?" Nathan remained silent for a moment, reflecting on the question. He didn't have an immediate answer. In his life in New York, surrounded by luxury and responsibilities, everything always seemed grand, yet hollow. There wasn't a single place he could call special in the way Ellie described. He took a deep breath, a bit hesitant, before responding. "To be honest, I don't think I've ever had a place like that. My life has always been filled with expectations and goals. I've never really stopped to think about what made me happy or what truly mattered to me. But now I think that place might be here with you." Ellie was taken aback by his confession. For a moment, she didn't know what to say, but the gentle smile on her face revealed how deeply Nathan's words had touched her. She turned her gaze toward the horizon, where the sea shimmered under the moonlight, and offered an unexpected suggestion. "If that's the case, maybe you should create a special place. Something that's yours but could also mean something to others. How about we start right now? Let's go to the beach." Nathan didn't question her. He followed Ellie to the cool sand, where the sound of the waves was amplified by the stillness of the night. She slipped off her shoes and he did the same. They walked until they reached a small rocky formation that Ellie seemed to know well. She sat on one of the rocks and gestured for him to join her. "My mom used to say that sometimes all we need to figure out what we want is to look at the ocean. It's vast, limitless. It reminds us that there's a whole world out there, full of possibilities. Nathan looked out at the ocean, listening intently to her words. He had never thought of the sea that way. To him, the ocean had always been just a beautiful backdrop, something distant and decorative. Now, sitting there with Ellie, it felt like something more. It felt like a metaphor for his own life, full of opportunities he had never dared to explore. "Maybe that's what I need," he said quietly, "to stop thinking about what others expect of me and start thinking about what I want. Maybe I just need a little more courage." Ellie chuckled softly, but her tone was full of warmth. "I think you're braver than you realize, Nathan. Walking away from a life full of certainties to search for something new isn't easy. And being here, allowing yourself to start over, already says a lot about who you really are." For a few minutes, they sat in silence, listening to the sound of the waves. It was a simple moment, yet it felt profound. Nathan felt something shift within him, a sense of peace he hadn't known he was seeking. When they finally stood to head back, Nathan looked at Ellie and realized that she was an essential part of that feeling. She wasn't just someone helping him find clarity. She was becoming the clarity itself. When he dropped her off in front of the small apartment above the cafe, Nathan hesitated for a moment. "Ellie, thank you for today. For everything, really. I don't know how to say this without sounding cheesy, but I think you're helping me find something I didn't even know I'd lost." Ellie smiled but didn't respond right away. Instead, she stood on her tiptoes and gave him a brief but heartfelt hug. "Good night, Nathan," she said softly before disappearing into her apartment, leaving him standing on the sidewalk, realizing that, for the first time, he was beginning to understand what truly mattered. That night, back at the beach house, Nathan couldn't get Ellie out of his mind. Her simplicity, the way she saw the world, and how effortlessly authentic she seemed. He realized he had reached a point of no return. This wasn't just admiration. It was something deeper, something he couldn't ignore. And he knew he would need to find the courage to be honest with her, and with himself about what he was feeling. The next morning, Nathan woke earlier than usual. The soft light of dawn streamed through the large windows of the beach house, painting the room in warm golden hues. He made his way to the kitchen, brewed a strong cup of coffee, and sat at the wooden table overlooking the ocean. His thoughts were consumed by Ellie. Everything about her, from the way she talked about her dreams to the subtle sparkle in her eyes when she smiled, seemed etched into his mind. He realized there was something he needed to confront. Ellie knew very little about who he truly was. He hadn't spoken about his wealth, his social standing, or the exact reason that had brought him to Montauk. Not because he wanted to hide it, but because he was afraid it might change how she saw him. Ellie was unlike anyone he had ever met, and with her, he felt he could finally just be Nathan, not the wealthy Carter heir. But now, with his feelings deepening into something undeniable, he knew he had to tell her the truth. At noon, Nathan went to the cafe, but Ellie wasn't at the counter as usual. He was greeted by one of the staff, who explained that Ellie had gone into town to take care of some errands and would return later in the afternoon. Nathan lingered longer than necessary, hoping she might appear unexpectedly. Eventually, he decided to leave, but with a plan in mind. That night, he would invite her to the beach house. It was time to fully open up his life to her. When Ellie returned to the cafe later that afternoon, Nathan was waiting at his usual table. She smiled when she saw him, and his heart raced. After a brief conversation, he extended the invitation. "Ellie, I want to show you something. My house here in Montauk. I think you should see it." Ellie seemed a bit surprised by the invitation but didn't hesitate. "All right, what time?" "After you close the cafe," Nathan replied. "You don't need to dress up or anything. It's just something I want to share with you." When the time came, Ellie met him at the entrance of the cafe, wearing a light jacket and simple boots. They drove in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, broken only by the soft hum of the car and the faint sound of the waves in the distance. When they finally arrived at the property, Ellie froze for a moment as she stepped out of the car. The mansion overlooking the ocean, with its striking architecture and windows glowing under the moonlight, looked like something out of a movie. "This is your house?" Ellie asked, her voice a mix of surprise and confusion. Nathan nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. He led her inside, and the interior of the house was just as grand as the exterior. Every detail, from the imposing chandeliers to the minimalist design, seemed meticulously curated. Ellie looked around, fascinated, but remained quiet. As he guided her to the main living room, Nathan took a deep breath. It was time to talk. "Ellie, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said from the beginning." He paused, trying to organize his thoughts. "I haven't been completely honest about who I am. My family were very wealthy. I grew up surrounded by luxury and expectations. And when I came to Montauk, it was to escape all of that. I needed a place where I could reconnect with myself, away from people who only saw my status, my wealth." Ellie listened attentively, not interrupting him. Nathan continued, his voice softer now. "I know I should have told you earlier, but with you, for the first time, I felt like I could just be myself. Not the Carter family heir, not the man everyone expects me to be. Just Nathan. And I didn't want to risk losing that." For a few seconds, Ellie was silent, taking in everything he had just revealed. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm but full of emotion. "Nathan, I won't lie. This is a lot to process. But you know what's funny? All this time, I never wondered about your life, about where you came from. Because to me, who you are was never tied to what you have. I've always seen you as someone trying to find a new beginning. And that doesn't change." Nathan felt a wave of relief so overwhelming he could barely hold back a smile. "You have no idea how much that means to me, Ellie. You're different from anyone I've ever met." She smiled, but there was something deeper in her eyes, something profound. "I believe true wealth lies in who we are, not in what we have. And I think you're starting to understand that too." They spent the rest of the night talking. Nathan showed her parts of the house that held meaning for him and shared more about his life before Montauk, leaving nothing out. Ellie listened to every word, and by the end, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the ocean, she placed her hand over his and spoke softly. "Thank you for trusting me. That says a lot about who you are." Nathan, looking into her eyes under the starlight, knew that there were no more barriers between them. For the first time, he felt that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The next morning, Nathan woke up feeling different, as if a weight he hadn't even realized he was carrying had finally been lifted. The conversation with Ellie the night before still echoed in his mind, and he knew something fundamental had changed between them. For the first time in a long while, he felt entirely authentic, free from hiding who he was or worrying about being judged for his wealth. Ellie accepted him for who he truly was, and that was something rare and invaluable. As he sipped coffee on the balcony of the beach house, watching the calm ocean, Nathan realized he didn't want to delay any longer. He wanted Ellie to know how much she meant to him. It wasn't just gratitude or admiration. It was something far greater, something he had never felt before. Resolute, he began planning a special day for her. That afternoon, he went to Seaside Haven, but when he arrived, he noticed that Ellie seemed distracted, quieter than usual. She greeted him with a smile, but Nathan could see something in her expression, a worry she couldn't quite hide. After some time, he approached the counter where she was organizing orders. "Ellie, is everything okay? You seem distant today," he asked, trying not to sound intrusive but genuinely concerned. Ellie sighed, placing her hands on her hips as she looked at him. "It's nothing serious, just a few things with the cafe. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough. You know, keeping everything running is a constant struggle. And now, with Jake in college, I feel like I have to carry it all on my own. And it's heavy." Nathan felt a pang in his chest. He admired Ellie's strength so much that it was easy to forget that even the strongest need support. He wanted to help her, but he also knew Ellie's pride wouldn't let her accept anything that felt like charity. He needed to find a way to support her without overstepping the boundaries she valued so much. "Ellie, you're one of the most incredible people I've ever met. What you've done with this place, with your life, and for your brother is something few people could achieve. But you don't have to carry everything alone. Sometimes, accepting help isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you trust the people by your side." She looked at him with a mix of surprise and emotion. Before she could respond, the cafe door opened, and a group of customers walked in. Ellie sighed, offering him a small smile, and returned to work, but Nathan could tell his words had touched something inside her. As he watched her move through the cafe, tending to customers with her usual grace and warmth, Nathan made a silent promise to himself. He would find a way to support Ellie, not just with the cafe, but with everything. He wanted to be someone she could lean on, just as she had unknowingly become that person for him. Later, as Ellie finished her shift, Nathan waited for her by the entrance. "I know you've had a hard day, but I want to show you something. It's important to me. Do you trust me?" Ellie nodded, though she looked visibly tired. Nathan led her to his car and drove down a road that ran parallel to the coast, the sun slowly setting on the horizon. After a few minutes, he stopped at a small overlook that opened to the sea, a quiet, secluded spot. He had prepared a simple picnic, with a blanket spread over the grass and a basket filled with food and wine. "I wanted to show you a place I found. It's not as special as the dance hall or the cafe, but it reminds me of you. Peaceful, genuine, and beautiful in a way that doesn't need anything extra." Ellie laughed softly, sitting down beside him. "You're getting good with words, Nathan." They talked for hours as the sky darkened and stars began to scatter across the heavens. Nathan opened up about his childhood, the emptiness he often felt even though he was surrounded by everything money could buy. Ellie shared memories of her mother, stories about Jake, and even a few insecurities she rarely admitted to herself. When a comfortable silence settled between them, Nathan looked over at Ellie, who was gazing up at the stars. The gentle breeze played with her hair, and he realized that this was the moment. With his heart racing, he turned to her and spoke with raw honesty. "Ellie, you've changed everything for me. When I came here, I didn't know who I was or what I wanted. But from the moment I walked into your cafe, you showed me something I've never had. You made me see that what matters isn't what I have, but who I am and who's by my side. And now I know that I don't want to be by anyone's side but yours." Ellie turned to him, her eyes shining with emotion. "Nathan, you sure know how to catch me off guard, don't you? I feel the same way about you, but I was scared that it was something I was making up in my head. You're so different from anyone I've ever known." He smiled, carefully taking her hand. "Different isn't bad, Ellie. In fact, I think it's exactly what we needed. Someone to remind us what really matters." And under the starlit sky, with the sound of the ocean in the background, Nathan and Ellie leaned closer. The kiss they shared wasn't just a gesture of affection, but a silent promise that they were ready to start something new together. In the days that followed, Nathan and Ellie seemed to step into a new phase. There was a quiet understanding between them, a connection that was now clearer and stronger. Nathan spent more time at Seaside Haven, no longer just a regular customer, but someone Ellie clearly looked forward to seeing every day. She began to carve out moments to sit with him during her breaks, even if only for a few minutes, exchanging smiles and words that, though simple, carried profound meaning. Nathan also started helping out with small tasks at the cafe, something that initially caught Ellie by surprise. He wiped tables, cleared dishes, and on one occasion, even ventured behind the counter to help serve coffee while Ellie dealt with a particularly difficult customer. "You know you don't have to do this, right?" Ellie said, laughing as she watched him attempt to balance a tray of cups. "I know," he replied with a smile, but I want to be a part of this. Part of you. Despite the growing happiness between them, Ellie didn't hide her moments of doubt. On a quiet evening, as they closed the cafe together, she voiced something that had been weighing on her mind for some time. Nathan, you're incredible, but sometimes I wonder, what if I'm not enough for you? I mean, you come from a world I can't even imagine, and I'm just me. Just this woman trying to keep a cafe running. Nathan stopped wiping down a table and turned to face her, stepping closer. He took her hands firmly in his and looked directly into her eyes. Ellie, stop thinking that way. Who you are, what you've built, it's everything to me. You've taught me to see the value in simple, real things. You are more than enough. You are everything I needed, but didn't know how to find. Ellie took a deep breath, her emotions catching up with her. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved something as good as what she was building with Nathan. The following week, Nathan made a decision. He wanted to give back to Ellie for everything she had given him, even if indirectly. Over the course of several days, he began observing how the cafe operated, noticing the challenges Ellie faced. He understood that the cafe was more than just a business to her. It was a symbol of her independence, her resilience, and her strength. But he also saw how much strain it placed on her and realized that the cafe needed improvements, updates that could lighten the load she carried alone. Without telling Ellie, Nathan contacted a local architect to plan some subtle renovations. He wanted to preserve the charm and essence of the place while making it more functional and comfortable for Ellie and her customers. New kitchen equipment, a dedicated rest area for Ellie and her staff, and even improved lighting for the cafe's interior were part of the plan. He also hired a lawyer to ensure everything was done legally and that the cafe would remain fully in Ellie's name, free from any interference. However, Nathan knew he needed to tell Ellie about the plan before moving forward. One evening, as they walked along the beach, he decided to open up. Ellie, there's something I need to tell you. I know how much the cafe means to you and how hard you've worked to get to where you are. I admire that more than you could ever imagine. But I also see how much it exhausts you, how you worry about every little detail on your own. And I want to help. Ellie paused, looking at him with curiosity and a hint of caution. Help how? She asked softly. Nathan took a deep breath and continued, I've been thinking about how I could make things a little easier for you, without taking away what you've built. I've been working on some ideas to make the cafe better, more functional and less stressful for you. But I want to make sure it's exactly what you want, and I wouldn't do anything without your blessing. Ellie stared at him, her expression a mixture of surprise and emotion. For a moment, she didn't say anything, but Nathan could see the conflict in her eyes as she tried to process what he had just shared. Ellie paused, looking at him with a mix of curiosity and hesitation. Nathan, what exactly do you mean? He took a deep breath before continuing. I want to help improve the cafe, not to change what it is, but to make your life a little easier. This isn't about money, Ellie. It's about you, about making sure you have more time to live, to dream, to just be yourself. Ellie remained silent, absorbing his words. She knew Nathan didn't have any ulterior motives, but accepting help had always been hard for her. I don't know, Nathan. It's difficult. I've worked so hard to build this on my own. I know, he replied, taking her hands in his. And that's exactly why I want to do this. Because you deserve it. Because you showed me what it's like to build something with love. And I want to be part of that in whatever way you'll let me. His words touched her in a way she didn't expect. For the first time, Ellie realized she didn't have to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders alone. She saw that Nathan wasn't trying to change who she was or what she had built. He was offering something she had never truly had before. Partnership. Okay, Ellie finally said, a shy smile forming on her lips. But only if you promise that every decision will be made with me. This place is still my home, and I want it to stay that way. Nathan smiled, relieved and moved. It's a promise, Ellie. Always together. In that moment, as the waves softly lapped at their feet and the moon illuminated the sky, Nathan and Ellie realized they were building something much bigger than a cafe or a new chapter in life. They were building a future together, founded on trust, respect, and a love that was growing deeper with each passing day. The renovations at Seaside Haven began quietly, and Ellie was by Nathan's side every step of the way, just as she had asked. At first, she was cautious, still grappling with the idea of letting someone else be involved in something that had been entirely hers for so long. But slowly, as she saw the changes take shape, she began to understand the positive impact it would have, not just on the cafe, but on her life as well. Nathan made sure to involve her in every decision, from the color of the walls to the design of the new wooden shelves. He understood that every detail held meaning for Ellie, and for him, the most important thing was ensuring the cafe remained a reflection of who she was. Watching her enthusiasm grow with each step of the process was a reward in itself, and Nathan never tired of seeing the passion she poured into everything she did. One evening, after another day spent together finalizing the finishing touches on the renovations, Nathan and Ellie decided to unwind on the terrace of the beach house. The ocean breeze was cool, and the distant sound of the waves filled the silence with a soothing rhythm. Ellie held a cup of tea, wrapped in a blanket Nathan had brought out for her, while he sat beside her, staring at the horizon. "This feels perfect," Ellie said softly, her voice carrying a hint of awe as she gazed out at the endless expanse of the sea. "It's like everything is finally falling into place." Nathan turned to her, his heart full. "That's because it is. And it's only the beginning, Ellie. You know this is kind of surreal, right?" Ellie said with a small, crooked smile as she gazed up at the star-filled sky. "If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be here, planning the future of my cafe with a man like you, I would have laughed in their face." Nathan chuckled softly, but there was a depth to his smile. "I never thought I'd find someone like you either, Ellie. I think sometimes life leads us exactly where we need to be, even if, at first, it feels like we're completely lost." Ellie turned to him, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink down to just the two of them. The breeze gently tousled her hair, and her eyes sparkled with something Nathan couldn't fully put into words, but he knew it was special. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment, and decided it was time to finally say what he'd been holding inside. "Ellie, I need to tell you something I've been feeling for a while. Since the first time I walked into your cafe, something in me changed. I didn't even know what I was looking for when I came to Montauk. But now I do. I was looking for you. You showed me that what matters isn't what I have or what I've achieved, but the connections we make, the people who truly see us. And you didn't just see me, you helped me see myself too." Ellie set her teacup down, her hands still wrapped in the blanket. She seemed to be processing his words, but her eyes glistened with emotion. Nathan, feeling his heart race, leaned in slightly toward her. "Ellie, since I met you, my heart has been beating differently. I know this might sound fast or unexpected, but I need to ask, will you be my girlfriend? Not because I want to fill some void, but because, for the first time, I feel like I've found someone who makes my life complete." Ellie was quiet for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. Then, a radiant smile spread across her face, and she tilted her head slightly. "Nathan, I've been trying to hide how I feel since the moment I met you. You unsettle me, you challenge me, and somehow, you make me feel like I can be more than I ever believed I could. And yes, I'll be your girlfriend, because with you, everything feels possible." Nathan felt a relief and joy unlike anything he'd ever experienced. He leaned closer and Ellie did the same. The kiss they shared was gentle but brimming with emotion, as though it marked the end of everything they'd endured up to that point and the beginning of something entirely new. They stayed on the balcony for hours, talking about the future, their dreams, and everything they wanted to build together. When the night finally wore on, a comfortable silence settled between them again. and as Ellie rested her head on Nathan's shoulder, he looked up at the starry sky and knew, with absolute certainty, that his search was over. He had found not just a home in Montauk, but a home in Ellie's heart. The sun began to rise over Montauk, painting the sky with warm shades of orange and gold. The Seaside Haven Cafe reopened its doors after the renovations, more vibrant and welcoming than ever. The space still retained the simple, rustic charm that Ellie loved so much, but now it felt even more functional and inviting. Small details that she and Nathan had added together brought a fresh energy to the cafe. From the neatly arranged shelves adorned with fresh flowers to the comfortable chairs that now filled the space. Ellie stood by the door, greeting the first customers with a wide smile. Jake had returned to help with the grand reopening, and his energy was infectious. He joked with the regulars and managed the counter, giving Ellie the freedom to move around the cafe, connecting with the people who made the place so special. Nathan watched it all from one of the tables, feeling an indescribable sense of fulfillment. He knew he hadn't just helped renovate a building. He had been part of something much bigger, the realization of a dream. In the middle of the afternoon, as the rush slowed down, Ellie walked over to Nathan's table, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. She sat down beside him, her smile brighter than ever. "You know what I realized today?" she said, placing a cup in front of him. "This place isn't just my home. It's home for so many people, and now it's home for you too. I don't think I could be any happier." Nathan reached across the table and held her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin against his. "Ellie, you've created something amazing here. But it's not the cafe that makes this place special. It's you. Your energy, your dedication. That's what keeps people coming back." Before she could respond, Jake appeared, calling Ellie over to speak with a supplier who had just arrived. She stood up quickly, flashing Nathan a smile before walking away. He watched her as she moved through the cafe, radiating a genuine happiness that seemed to brighten the entire room. It was hard to believe that just a few months ago, he had arrived in Montauk as a lost man, running from everything. Now, he had found not just a sense of purpose but also love and belonging. Later, at the end of the day, after the last customer had left and Jake had said his goodbyes to return to college, Ellie and Nathan were alone in the cafe. The silence was comfortable, and the lingering scent of fresh coffee filled the air. Ellie sat on the counter, swinging her legs like a child, while Nathan watched her with a relaxed smile. "Are you tired?" he asked, walking closer to her. "A little," she admitted, "but it's the good kind of tired, you know? The kind that makes you feel like it was all worth it." Nathan placed his hands on her waist, gently pulling her a little closer. "And now, what's the next dream?" Ellie tilted her head, thinking for a moment, her eyes sparkling with mischief and hope. "I think it's about time I dream a little bigger. And maybe this time I won't dream alone." Nathan grinned, his heart swelling at her words. "Good. Because wherever you go, Ellie, I'm going with you." And as the moon rose high above Montauk, casting its silver glow over the cafe, the two of them stayed there, dreaming of a future they now knew they'd build together. Ellie laughed softly, her expression thoughtful as she wrapped her arms around his neck. Maybe it's finally taking a vacation, or who knows, expanding the cafe's menu. "I still have so many ideas, Nathan. You know how my mind works." He chuckled too, but his gaze grew more serious. "And what about us? What's our next step?" Ellie looked at him, her eyes shining with a mix of emotion and anticipation. "I think we're already in our next step. We're building something together, and that's more than I ever could have imagined." Nathan smiled, leaning in to kiss her softly. In that moment, he knew that everything he had gone through to get to this point had been worth it. Ellie wasn't just the woman he loved. She was his home, his peace, his reason to believe in a future full of endless possibilities. When the kiss ended, they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms in the middle of the cafe. The space around them was no longer just a testament to Ellie's hard work. It had become a symbol of the love they had found in one another. Outside, the gentle streetlights reflected in the windows, and the sound of the ocean in the background played like a melody, cradling the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Nathan looked into Ellie's eyes and said, with all the conviction in his heart, "With you, I found everything, and I promise that, from here on out, we'll build so much more." Together, Ellie smiled, resting her forehead against his. "And I promise I'll never stop dreaming, because now I know I have you to dream with me." In that moment, under the stars that were just beginning to dot the sky, Nathan and Ellie started writing the next chapter of their story. Not with grand gestures or elaborate promises, but with the simple and powerful certainty that they had each other. And, for them, that was more than enough. If you enjoyed this video, let us know in the comments. Your opinion is very important to us. Don't forget to subscribe. A big hug, and see you in the next video.